Oh yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'm scared, brother.
¿Por qué?
Cause I don't know. It's just scary, kinda.
Tú hablas perfecto español. Inglés.
Español, yeah, for
Español,
sure.
sí.
All right, so I'm super happy to announce the first episode in English of this podcast. This episode is going to be with Andrew Norrie. It's going to be a pleasure for me to be here today with a friend, with a former coworker, with a real estate investor. We're gonna understand what he is in a couple seconds. But I just want to say that I'm really proud of this project, and I'm really proud of having him here because Sin Punto Final, that's the name of the podcast, is in Spanish. Is going to grow, and he is going to be the first person. So thank you for that, for being here.
De nada.
And thank you guys for being part of this project. So Andrew,
Sí.
I just want to start a little bit with asking, like, who's Andrew Norrie? Who are you?
Andrew Norrie. I'm a Canadian. We're doing this episode in English because I speak a little bit of Spanish. Vive en países españoles para 2 años durante la pandemia, pero ahora yo tengo solo un amigo español, Lucas.
There you go.
Entonces no hablo español mucho. So we're going to do this in English. Andrew is a Canadian real estate investor and entrepreneur. I'm passionate about fitness. I like to consider myself a go-getter, a problem solver. I like to take on new challenges and tasks. I'm a learner. I like to learn new things constantly. I want to challenge myself in that regard. I'm a world traveler, a world explorer. I'm just a guy, 28, going through the motions of life and trying to retire early.
All right. So, Andrew, we're going to be talking about a little bit of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I know you own some houses here in Windsor.
Mm-hmm.
You own another, like, Airbnb and stuff. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I own a real estate company right now called Norrie Capital. It's my last name. It's a real estate holding company, and it's the corporate entity for my real estate investments. And I've been in real estate since I was 18 or 19 is when I bought my first house. So we can talk about that in a second. But I'm now a real estate developer. I flip houses. I own long-term real estate assets. And more recently, over the last couple of years, I've started building houses as well. And I find that building houses is a way in a real estate market that's not so great, like Canada. We can talk about that as well, to create equity instantly and really plan for a comfortable retirement. So I find real estate assets to be one of my favorite asset classes. And I'm pretty big in real estate.
All right, you said a couple important things there. So I want to start, like, how did the process of being 18-year-old and buying a house went? Like, how was that process?
Yeah, so the story of my first house is kind of funny. I had no idea when I bought my first house, or just before I bought my first house, that I could do that. It wasn't something that I was planning for. I had read no books about it. The story began when I started working at 16. So I got my first job when I legally could in Canada. And I just didn't have any spending habits at the time. So really all the money I made, I lived at home at the time. I had no expenses. So I slowly saved up money, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. And then I saved up, I remember exactly, $22,500 by the time I was about 19. And I was going into my second year of university. And my plan at the time, I had looked at my checking account and I said, okay, I've got enough money. I'm going to move out. I was living at home for the first year of uni. And I wanted to move out with my friends. I was in the rowing team at Western. I was in a fraternity. So I talked to my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, I'm going to move out. And she's like, okay, where are you going to live? I told her I'm going to rent. And she's like, that's stupid. Don't do that.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, well, where am I going to live then? And she's like, I think you can buy a house because you have money saved up. And I was like, I don't think I have enough money to buy a house. And she's like, I think you do. Go to TD Bank and ask them about it. So I booked an appointment at my local TD Bank branch and sat down. I said, hey, I've got $22,500 and I've got 2 part-time jobs. I want to buy a house. And they're like, okay, there's a way we can make this work. And it's by buying an income property. So I did a 5% down payment. I bought my first principal residence at 18. And the bank at the time was pretty flexible. And they took the rental values of that first house and applied that to my income. So 2 part-time jobs is not really enough to support a mortgage even back then. But I bought my first house for $289,000 back when you could buy houses for that in London. Now it's about 2.5 times that price. But I bought it right by the university, and it had 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So I lived in the basement bedroom, and then I rented the other 4 bedrooms out to people that I just met on Facebook, just random people from Toronto, people I didn't even know. They all paid me $500 a month. And I was looking at my bank statements after a couple months of doing this, living in my own house, and I was making money. So I learned, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, I live for free, and I have my own house, and it's paying for my groceries as well. It's like making me money on top of my mortgage, which was $800 a month at the time. I haven't seen a number like that in a while. So that's when I learned, at the age of 19 or 20, that real estate is a way of not only making money every month, but also creating equity. Because I looked and I said, okay, well, I have a house that's worth $300,000. By the time this mortgage is paid off, 25 years later, I will have this house debt-free, and the value of this house will be my net worth. So I learned pretty quickly that, okay, if I have a house that's worth $350,000, $400,000 when I retire, that means I have $400,000 when I retire. So if I buy 5, 6, 7 more houses, I will have several $1 million. They'll be paid off by the time I retire, and I will live off of that money. So that's my retirement plan.
And how did you learn all that stuff at 19? Because I'm 20 and I want to learn all that stuff. So where do you go? What do you see? Where do you learn? Like, what can I do or what can people do to learn about real estate? Yeah,
the beautiful thing about being in this generation and in the generation of information and media is we don't have to figure out anything ourselves. It's all out there. There have been people who have done every single kind of business idea that you could possibly think of, and they've done it successfully. So you just need to go follow those people, consume content from those people, and learn from those people. So I started with a podcast and a series of books called the Bigger Pockets Podcast. It's the biggest real estate podcast out there. And after I graduated university, I had one house. I bought a second house in Windsor when I moved to the United States, and I had a lot of driving for this job. I was a consultant at various universities, so I would have 8-hour drives once a week, and I listened to every episode of the Bigger Pockets Podcast, and I learned about Airbnb, I learned about rentals, I learned about apartment buildings, I learned about international investing, I learned about tax laws and corporate laws. And just from this one podcast and also the books that company wrote, I learned everything I know today about real estate. And then I just did what the book said. So now I have a real estate portfolio of about 10 units, and I've got 8 more units under construction today. So I've got my biggest project that I've ever started. It's about a $2 million townhouse. I'm starting construction in the next couple of weeks. So in just a short couple of years, in 10 years since I started real estate investing, I've secured my retirement and the future of myself and my family just through real estate, let alone other asset classes. And I learned it all from a podcast.
Why do you like real estate over other businesses?
I like other businesses as well. I think it's important to diversify. So I'm not going to be that person that tells you real estate is, the one thing. And especially over the last couple of years, the Canadian government has made some very poor decisions that have led to real estate being a lower quality asset class. With that said, real estate is always going to be in demand. So Canada's population is growing very, very fast. It's actually outpacing dramatically the availability of housing. So it goes back to 10th grade economics. It's a supply versus demand thing. The demand is so much higher than the supply, which means the prices will always rise at least slowly, if not fast, which they have over the last couple of years. And they will always be worth at least what you buy them for, generally speaking. Canada is a low risk for a real estate crash. So I can do some very simple math. I know that my investments when I retire will return on average 8% a year. So I need to make the decision. I already have made the decision that I take 8% a year of my total assets, my total net worth, and that's what my income is, like basically my low tax job when I retire. So if I want to retire with $500,000 in income a year, I just need to figure out what $500,000 is 8% against my real estate portfolio. So long as I retire with a certain number of real estate assets, then I know that I will retire comfortably, and I'll be able to pay for my living, I'll be able to pay for my travel, and pay for my family.
Is there any specific number that you want to have, like of 100 houses or something like that? Or
I definitely don't want 100 houses. I think that's probably too much to manage, and it slightly increases the risk a little bit. But I think if I retire with $5 million in real estate, then I will have a comfortable annual income when I retire.
But don't you think that $5 million is not a lot? Like $5 million, just like could be like 5 houses or like big houses.
Yeah, it's about 5 to 20 houses, depending on where I buy them and what kind of class of house they are. But I think 8 to 10% of $5 million in real estate is $500,000 in income a year, and
Sure.
I'm pretty comfortable that I can live off of $500,000 a year. Even with inflation, $500,000 a year is a pretty competitive income to retire off of.
All right, let's circle back to the intro. You said you have done like flipping houses.
Yep.
You buy. Do you sell? You buy or you sell? Or both?
I sell some houses. So I've gotten to the point where I had so many real estate assets, and with the rising mortgage rates and the decreasing value of houses, I had to sell a couple of my assets. So I would call it a reshuffling or a reorganization of my real estate portfolio. So I sold off some of my lower performing assets that I can keep my higher performing assets.
Yeah. All right. So buying, selling, flipping. Which one do you prefer in all of those things that you can do with a house? Which one do you prefer, and why?
My favorite thing to do with houses is to do massive value adds or new builds. So the project that I just wrapped up last week was I bought a house in Windsor, Ontario, right across from Detroit, and it was a double lot. So it was a small single family home with essentially two lots. It was a house on the side and then a big empty side yard. So what I did with that is I bought the property, and then I went to the city of Windsor and I severed the lot from one lot into two lots. And then on the empty lot, I built 3 units on that property. So the value of those units after construction were worth a lot more than what it cost to build them. So I immediately printed money. It's like a money printing machine. So it was $550,000 to build, and they're immediately worth $750,000. And because it's 3 luxury units, brand new builds, the mortgage is paid for by the tenants. So I just finagled properties and numbers. I created housing because I think it's important for real estate investors to look at what they do with an ethical and philosophically sound lens. Right? Those houses wouldn't have existed unless I built them. So I put my money forward. I built those houses. I created units in an economy in a country that needs units, and now the tenants pay for my mortgage. So I increased my net worth by $750,000, and I pay nothing for that.
Correct. Do you have your real estate license or something, or you don't?
I don't have my real estate license. I have a great realtor.
You don't need to have a real estate license to do that?
Nope.
Why not?
Any Canadian can buy a house.
So when do you need a real estate license?
If you want to be an agent, if you want to buy and sell houses, if you want to buy and sell other people's houses and be their representative, you need your real estate license. So anyone listening to this, if you're in Windsor, I've got a great realtor recommendation for you, Clark Daly. If you're in London, I've got a great realtor recommendation for you, Ryan McLean. And I've got recommendations around Canada, around the United States.
And have you ever thought about becoming an agent?
No, I don't think it's really the thing I want to do. I'm a pretty passive investor, so I like to start businesses that I work 80 to 100 hours in a week to get them started, and I make them autonomous. So my real estate is all 2 hours away from where I live here in London, Ontario, and I don't ever have to see them. It's fully remote. It's text and FaceTime to do everything. I've got my property manager there who does everything with the fixing and maintenance of the properties and fills them with tenants. And I've got my realtor, Clark, who finds the deals and I buy them through his help. I've got my lawyer here in London, so everything is totally remote, which means I can go live anywhere in the world, and my real estate is totally autonomous because I've got great partners in the business.
So I think one of the most important things for you to start a business is having people surrounding you with the same idea, right? Like-minded people.
Totally.
So how do you find your partners? How did you find those people that wanted to do the same thing as you, and those people to trust? Because it's pretty hard to trust in somebody with your money,
Totally.
So how do you find those people, and where, how?
Again, it's the easiest generation ever to find great partners. You don't have to go to newspapers anymore. You don't have to go to the phone book. You can just go to Facebook groups. So I look at Facebook groups and I make posts in those Facebook groups that are about real estate. I ask for the best property manager. I ask for the best realtor. And then I call every single person that is referred to me, and I actually interview them, because not only I'm friends with all the people that I work with who make me money and help me manage my assets, but in the initial stage of the relationship, it's really important to interview these people. And I ask them questions about who they are, what their values are, why they are a good partner for me. And I pick the person who I think is best. And sometimes I've made mistakes, but generally speaking, those interviews are a really effective way to find great contractors. They're a way to find great realtors and property managers. So I treated it like a job. These people don't work for me. They're not a part of my company, but they're my partners. And if you look at that relationship through that kind of critical lens, it's a great way to find awesome partners in any industry around the world.
So in this case of talking about real estate, who do you need to be with? You need to be with a realtor, you need to be with a lawyer, with who else needs to be in that group?
Every real estate investor needs a great lawyer, they need a great realtor, they need a great property manager. And typically that property manager, if they are great, will deal with the renovations and the leasing. So those three are the most important partners, I think. And they probably need a great builder. So when I started buying some smaller assets, I built additional dwelling units or ADUs in the backyards of those properties. And that helped me skyrocket the value of those assets. So I turned single family homes into duplexes by building, tiny homes, carriage homes, ADUs in the back there. So I've got 2 of those now. And it'll be my strategy moving forward. Anytime I buy a property that has a big lot, I will either sever that lot to build more units, or I'll put a unit on the property. And in Canada, it's becoming increasingly feasible to do that. So for me, it's a lawyer, a builder, a property manager, and a realtor.
So I'm gonna ask you two different things here. The first one, you just said that the market is growing here in Canada because of the Canadian population is growing.
Yep.
And part of that is because of the immigration things, immigrants, right?
Yep.
Just like me.
Yep.
Right? So I got 2 questions here. The first one, how is dealing with tenants? And the second one, have you ever had, or I don't know, would you like to have immigrant as a tenant, or just like Canadians, because the culture?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's illegal to pick what kind of tenant you have. You aren't allowed to discriminate. So anyone who has the right credit score, the right application, the right income can rent any of my units. I've got refugees as tenants, I've got immigrants as tenants, and I've got longer term Canadians as tenants. So I've got a whole mix. I've had good and bad experiences with them all. I've had Canadian citizens who stopped paying rent, and I've had to bring them to court. I've lost a lot of money doing that. And I've got refugees who pay their rent on time every single time. So I wouldn't approach, looking at a particular group as tenants. As long as they meet certain criteria, then they can rent my units. And generally speaking, it's gone pretty well. Sometimes it hasn't.
And how's dealing with tenants? Because you can do something else, but dealing with tenants, how's that?
Dealing with tenants can be very annoying. Luckily, I've got a property management company, so I don't really deal with tenants. So my property management company, I pay them 8% of my rent every single month, and they deal with everything: broken toilet, bad tenants, noise complaints, police reports, lost rent, anything it might be. The property management company takes care of it.
All right. Now let's talk about a little bit about Airbnb.
Airbnb.
How's that? I don't know a lot about Airbnb, so tell me.
Yeah.
What should I know about Airbnb?
I love short-term rentals. So it's called STR, short-term rentals. So Airbnb, Vrbo, what other platform. I have one Airbnb at the moment, and it's great. Airbnb is an awesome tool for me, my personal investment strategy, because I would like to slowly acquire assets around the globe. I want to buy really nice houses in all of the parts of the globe that I like to spend time. So Hawaii, California, Texas, here in Canada, British Columbia, somewhere in Europe. So my goal is to have a number of Airbnbs by the time I retire. And a person like me, we never really retire. We just kind of stop, work a little bit less.
Yeah, correct.
So Airbnb I like because when you're not there, you can rent it on Airbnb. And as long as you have a property manager in that market, they do it all for you. So in Windsor, I've got an Airbnb. It's a beautiful home. It's one of the number 1 rated Airbnbs in all of Windsor. And it makes me money when I'm not there. And if I ever need to stay in Windsor, I've got a place. I block it on my iPhone, and I use the key code. I unlock the door, and I have a place to stay. It's clean. It's got everything you need. So my goal is coming up next, I'll buy an Airbnb in another part of Canada so that when I'm there, I will live there. When I'm not there, it'll be making me money.
Correct.
And if your home is not making you money, then there's a better option for you.
Mm-hmm. Why do you buy a lot of your properties in Windsor? Like, why Windsor?
I chose the market Windsor for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was living in Ohio primarily, and it was the closest Canadian city to where I was living.
So that was how long ago?
That would have been 6 years ago.
Gotcha.
I moved to the United States to work, and I worked there for 2 years. So it was the closest market. I had a great realtor in that market who was making a lot of money in that market. The prices were very low considering the rest of the prices in Canada, and it was growing. So Windsor is known as a cheaper market in Canada. It's right across from the city of Detroit, which has historically been not great economically, but is now on the rise. It's got a great college and a great university. It's one of the busiest cross-border crossings between Canada and the United States. It's a trade hub. It's on the water. It's one of the most temperate climates in Canada. So people go down there to retire. And especially when prices in Toronto are just absolutely absurd. Like Toronto is one of the most expensive cities in the world. And it really offers nothing, in my opinion, hot take. But it's not worth the price. So you have a lot of people in there, a lot of young people and young families who are leaving Toronto. And instead of forcing their families to live in tiny little shoeboxes in the sky, they're buying full houses with backyards and driveways and garages in Windsor. So it's a safe market. The population is growing. And I think the last thing that's really important is the government in Windsor is favorable to real estate investors because they know they need more houses. So they work with people like me to build more houses. They've made it a lot easier on me than other cities like London, Toronto, Victoria, Vancouver would make it to build extra units and get projects done.
In terms of expanding, you said you would like to have a real estate in Europe, British Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, which parts of Europe would you like to have? Like, why not South America? Why not other countries? Why not Africa? Why not Asia?
If I'm going to own an asset, I want the government and the country to be stable with a strong economy and reliable income and reliable rent. So, en Europa me encanta España. Vive en España para 4 meses, Barcelona, y me encanta el sur de España. So I want to buy a condo or a small house in Marbella, Malaga, Valencia, so that when in the winter I can go there and I can live there, and other times it's a great place for my friends to live in. Airbnb. I also want something in Hawaii. I love South America. I lived in South America for 1.5 years, so I have nothing but strong feelings for South America, particularly Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Argentina. But those governments aren't nearly as stable as I would like. And all those countries have had tough times in the past. So if I wanted to buy an asset there, number one, it's hard to, as a foreigner. You kind of have to buy it cash. And I think that's a poor investment strategy. I don't want to bring, $500,000 in a suitcase down to Nicaragua. I would rather own my assets in safe, secure economies and then use the income and the profit from those investment assets to rent in those countries. So it's easier. I don't have to worry about, a hurricane, a tropical storm, a government coup, a dictatorship like in Nicaragua.
Correct. Yeah.
I would just take the profits from good, sound real estate assets and go rent a villa on the beach, which I've done for 1.5 years.
Correct. Yeah. And we're going to start wrapping up this. But before that, I just want to ask you, in terms of politics, how do you see the Canadian government? How do you see the future of Canadian government, and how does that affect real estate investing?
Yeah, so I don't really want to share my political opinions on a podcast, but I'll just let people listening know that I make my political decisions by looking at data. So I look at graphs. I say, are things better today than they were when the current government started? Things like small business, entrepreneurship, tax rates, the cost of living, the happiness index, healthcare quality. And if they are not, I would encourage anyone listening to this podcast to make informed decisions based on what you want from your country and what the data says. So the data says today that the Canadian government and the future of Canada is a bleak, pretty dismal future, unfortunately. There are less entrepreneurs and small businesses today than there were 10 years ago. Healthcare quality has declined. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Inflation has skyrocketed. From purely a number and a data sense, Canada is no longer a favorable market all things considered. And it's a much less favorable market and favorable country to live in than it once was. And you actually see immigrants coming to Canada and then leaving. And they go back to the countries that they came from because it's too expensive and it doesn't offer what they were hoping.
Yeah, I mean, that's part true and that's part not, but like we have like different points of view, me being Colombian and you being Canadian. And but yeah, I agree with you. But before we finish this, I just wanted to give us like 3 advices to start, buy, and continue with our real estate investing. What would you say? 3 advices.
Yeah, 3 pieces of advice. Number 1, surround yourself by people who are doing better than you. So I try to surround myself with a community that's doing better than me, whether it be fitness, whether it be real estate, whether it be entrepreneurship. If you surround yourself by people who are doing more and bigger, better things than you, then by default, you will start doing more, better, bigger things. If you are the most successful person in your friend group and the happiest person in your friend group, then you really only go down. So I try to surround myself by people who I look up to and who inspire me to do more. So that's piece of advice number 1. Number 2 is come up with a plan. So don't live year by year, month by month. Come up with a plan on where you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then where you want to be when you retire. Paint a picture for yourself. How are you going to be the happiest? What are you doing? Where do you live? How much money do you have? What income do you need? And then from that plan, you can reverse engineer what you need to be doing today. So I know exactly how much I need to retire with, to start a family, to be a positive impact in my community, to live in places where I can find communities that lift me up and that I can lift up in turn. And I've built a plan around that. I've been executing that plan over the last 10 years and I'm making great progress. Like I am so much more further along in my plan than I imagined I would because I had that plan starting 10 years ago. And then the third piece of advice would be always learn. Never stop learning. Listen to podcasts, read more books. You can see on the camera, I've got books everywhere in my apartment. I try to humble myself and realize that in the grand scheme of things, I know nothing, even after 10 years of dedication to learning more things. So if I learn something new every day and I dedicate myself to learning new things and trying new things, then even if I fail 90% of the time, 10% of the time I will be successful. And that 10% of success will lift me up to levels of success and fulfillment and achievement that I never imagined when I was young I would ever have done so.
There's a quote that I really like is, the more I learn, the less I know.
Absolutely.
So I've been reading some really good books about sales, about business, about everything. And I totally agree with you because people think that they know a lot of things, but they do not know anything about life. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the first episode in English. Thank you for being who you are, because I really want to become like you, like Jad, like Jess, people that I really want to become. Like I just see you guys as let's call them mentors, right? So I really appreciate that. Thank you again for being here. It was an absolute pleasure. Andrew, that was the first episode in English of Sin Punto Final. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And we'll have more content soon. So see you guys later.
Hasta luego.